In today's show, we talk Trailblazers exit interviews where Joe Cronin and Chauncey Billups addressed the media in Portland and talked about the vision for what's next. And what exactly is next? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Coming at you free on all platforms, Monday through Friday, each and every weekday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, I want to talk about the Blazers' exit interviews, the last formal media appearance by the team of the 2023-2024 season happened today at their practice facility on Monday. You were listening to Tuesday, April 16th show. I appreciate you listening. I want to talk about specifically focusing on the comments from Joe Cronin and Chauncey Billups in today's show. I thought Cronin kind of laid out his vision for what's next for the Blazers, not in specific terms, but I think he gave enough hints at what next year is going to look like that you kind of know where this thing is headed. And I thought quite frankly, Chauncey Billups laid out something that sounded different. Not that it was in opposition to what Cronin had said, but Billups, who spoke first in sort of just the order of operations, Billups seemed to indicate that he wanted something different than what Joe Cronin was selling the media. I want to talk about those sort of two differing viewpoints in the second segment. And then I want to close the show talking about the challenge ahead. I think this has been a theme of a lot of my recent podcasts, but with some sort of specifics as helped by Malcolm Brogdon and Emfrey Simons and Rob Williams in their final comments to the media this season. I want to talk about what's next and the balance this team is trying to strike and whether it's even frickin' possible. Let's start with Cronin, though. He laid out his vision that if you're hoping that the Blazers are better next year. And at one point, I think it was reported that the Blazers maybe were kind of toying with the idea of being better next year. But if you were hoping that the Blazers are going to try to be competitive next year in a meaningful way, I do not think Joe Cronin's comments gave you any sense that is what the team, where the team is headed. In his sort of prepared opening remarks statements, he talked about the players that this, he said he used the phrase up and down season. I would say mostly down. They lost 61 times. And they intentionally lost at the end of the year, losing 15 of their last 17. Those two wins against the two teams below them in the standings. Hornets aren't really below them in the standings, but they were bad, and then they were bad on purpose. Mostly down, Joe. But he laid out when he said, there were some positives in there, and he talked about the young guys. He specifically mentioned Scoot Henderson, and he specifically mentioned Shaedon Sharpe, and he specifically mentioned Ryan Rupert, and he specifically mentioned Chris Murray, and DeAndre Ayton got a shout out. None of the other vets got a shout out. None of the sort of mid-range vets like Matisse Thybulle or things like that. It's like the rookie class and Shaedon Sharpe, and then also DA. And that's a little tinfoil hatty. I'm not trying to say that's the only thing that matters. I'm just trying to say it's the opening remarks set the stage on what this is going to be about, the development path. And Cronin continued to, I got some tinfoil hat theories, to be honest. Text me if you want. If you don't have my phone number, text me. I'll share them with you. But Cronin admitted as much that he said, we have a lot invested in our young assets and our young guys. This team is not going to rush the process with the youngsters that need seasoning. And Cronin talked sort of about understanding the timeline that they're on. And even when pressed by Aaron Fentress of the Oregonian. I think Fentress was hoping that Cronin was going to say, "Nah, we might try to be good," because I think Fentress has watched a lot of bad basketball in his time on the beat, and he would love to watch some competitive basketball. He's like, if an opportunity presented itself, would you? This Aaron Fentress, Oregonian beat writer, asking Cronin, if an opportunity presented itself, would you make a deal to upgrade the team and try to chase a playoff berth? And Cronin was like, yeah, no. He not in so many words. Yeah, no. Basically what he said is we're not good enough. We need to upgrade the talent. We need to upgrade some skill sets, including shooting and playmaking. All true, very reasonable assessment of the team. But then he kind of backtracked and sidestepped the idea of adding win now talent. It's we have to understand the timeline we're on and whether players we're adding, we can't scoff at talent, he said, but we can't pass up the opportunity to add talent, but it has to make sense with where we're headed, what the timeline we're on. And to me, that says this team is going to stink next year. And that's not a surprise. That's probably even the responsible thing to do, right? But if you were there wasn't a lot of sort of concrete stuff, and I don't think it would be even reasonable to say, here's the plan, general public type of thing. Or I think, and it would also be a mistake to project we want to be good. But I think more so than he has in the past, Joe Cronin kind of led on to the idea that they're going to be bad next year, and they're going to be bad on purpose because they're committed to the developmental path of the young players that they have drafted over the last 2 drafts. That's why the folks who got shout-outs in his opening remark got shout-outs, because that's the vision. Commit to the young guard duo and move forward and be bad with them, and then eventually get good, right? And they need to add players to get good and all of those things, and Cronin admitted as much. But in the immediate term, next season, this is a team that's going to lose 55 games again. And I think Cronin was honest in his assessment that they need to add talent, and he said he viewed this as a developmental year, and they kind of got to continue to follow that developmental path, and it's his job to sort of add the right parts around that. He didn't get into specifics. He didn't mention names. He wasn't and we got to trade Jeremy Grant and Malcolm Brogdon. But he did specifically kind of mention the youth and the timeline and the developmental picture that they are on, and the need to be patient. And they'll, he's we'll be aggressive to be aggressive. We'll be aggressive to get better, but we'll have to exercise patience and sort of that balance. And we've heard Cronin talk, very specifically about, being outrageously aggressive and then do nothing in the previous offseason with Damian Lillard. But I don't think this was that sort of bombastic, declarative kind of firm statements. This wasn't even the same firm level of statements that he had in the at the trade deadline, where it's I like where we are and all those things. This was hey, we weren't very good. We're probably going to have to exercise patience to not be very good again, and we'd love to draft Cooper Flagg next year. We'd love to add Ace Bailey to this roster, right? He didn't go that far, obviously, but I kind of got the sense that more so than in the past. And there was some reporting around the trade deadline that the Blazers were going to hold on to their vets because they wanted to be more competitive next year. And I don't think they want to be bad, right? That they would prefer to have won this year, probably they would have preferred it. I don't even know if they'd want to win more, right? Because they actively lose at the end of all these seasons, very, very intentionally, and hold vets out and all these things, right? So I think they would just like to look more competent prior to the aggressive tank. I think that's the way to put it. I actually very specifically do not think the Blazers wanted to win more games this season. I think they wish that Shaedon Sharpe had played more games, and I think they wish that Scoot Henderson had played better early in the season and all those things, but I don't think they wanted to win more. It's their goal is to continue a developmental path and collect lottery balls, right? And that's the balance. And I think Cronin was more honest about that vision today than he has been in the past. And there was some reporting, like I said, there's some reporting around the trade deadline. It's oh, maybe they want to do this and be competitive and all those things. I did not get that sense from Cronin today that is still the vision. And perhaps there was a sobering reality of how far away this team is, that it's yep, we're not quite there. That was the vision from Cronin. I thought it was interesting, and And, I've joked in the past that I think sometimes Cronin just says that the thing you're supposed to say, even though it's very precisely untrue. And I think he's gotten himself in trouble sometimes by saying what he believes is the right thing as opposed to believes like the actual truth. I thought in today's interview, spoke about 15 minutes with the assembled media there. Full disclosure, I was not there. I was on my day job, but I thought he was pretty straightforward in the direction they're going to go. And interestingly enough, it was in some ways a contrast from what Chauncey Billups said. One thing but Cronin did mention is that Billups will be back next year in the final guaranteed year of his contract. There's a team option for year 5 on it, as it was first reported by Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN way back when. Billups spoke first, and he might be coming back as the head coach, but I don't think he really shares the patience level of Joe Cronin. He'll probably get on board and be down with the plan, because Billups, if nothing else, has been down with the plan, but he didn't sound like someone today that's excited about where this thing is headed. And where this thing might be headed is to losing more games, and that was not what Chauncey Billups was asking for on Monday morning. Let's talk about that in the second segment. First, I want to tell you that this next episode and this next segment here is brought to you by the good folks at BetterHelp. Therapy can be incredibly valuable for whatever you're going through in life, whether it's an acute traumatic event or just the sort of bumps and bruises and trials and tribulations of trying to live out there in the world. Talking to a therapist, a neutral third party, can be incredibly valuable to help you sharpen your tools, right? Therapy is developing tools or talking through approaches to get you through things big and small. We're all dealing with something, and therapy can be different for everyone. Most folks have problems, whether those are large problems or small problems. It's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. So visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba and you'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. All right. Chauncey Billups is going to be the coach again in the fall. Certainly sounds like it. But when he spoke on Monday morning at the Blazers practice facility, he didn't sound like someone very excited to coach a bad team again. In fact, I thought Chauncey Billups he talked like someone feeling the weight of a 61-loss season. I think he feels the weight of being the face of the dude who loses every night. And certainly, I'm very critical of Chauncey Billups right here on this podcast. It's not like it's happening independent of his actions, right? But I thought the losing and Chauncey Billups' job are related in some ways, right? His ability to coach the team is related to the 61 losses. But I thought he spoke today like someone really feeling the weight of winning 21 times in 82 games. And moreover, feeling the weight of never having coached a team that is competitive. He spoke like someone entering year 4 of his coaching journey, realizing that he's never coached a team that's ever been good. I mean, they started 10-4 last year. He coached 14 games of them being pretty good, but when they were bad for a while, right? And they've punted on the end of 3 seasons in a row. And he has been, this is the worst stretch of Blazer basketball since the 70s in terms of consecutive losing seasons. And Billups has been at the helm. He's never coached a team that's good. And I think he was coaching like someone who was he was speaking today to the media like someone kind of feeling that burden. He was sullen, and he admitted as much that this season was probably his hardest season as a head coach, because he also admitted that he was maybe a little too optimistic at the beginning of the year. He thought that they were going to be competitive, and I mentioned this in yesterday's show, that Billups had said that he thought, that maybe they wouldn't be like a play-in team, because he looks at the West and he's like, oh, the freaking Lakers and Warriors are a play-in team? That's like their rosters are better than ours. But he thought they would be competitive. He thought they'd be kind of like in the mix and playing games into, when the calendar flips and playing games in February and January and February. That's like, hey, if we win this, we're 10th. We're in the mix, and finish in that 11-12 range, as opposed to the third worst, tied for the third worst record in the league. I think Billups isn't baking in the fact that the organization is committed to losing the final 10 to 15 games of the regular season extremely aggressively every year. So you're only really playing 67 games. you only get a chance to win the first 67, and then it's over for you. But I mentioned that Billups' vision sounded a little different than Cronin's. Billups, like I said, I think he talked some kind of feeling the weight of these seasons, feeling the weight of all these losses, feeling the weight of being the public face that has to be the guy that loses. Again, it's not, he's the dude in the hot dog suit. We know who did it. But like, he talked about wanting to be a competitive team, to end this cycle of being a team that loses, of not coming back here again and feeling this again and feeling the 60 losses and all those things. And he wants to be a team that is much more competitive in the fall, because that's who he's always been as a player. And really, like, once kind of Billups figured it out after about 5 years of his NBA career, he was very, very good teams for the rest of his career. And he played a long time and he won a bunch, and that's like what he's known for as a player in the league, right? The dude's a winner. And he was brought in to be the sort of guiding light on a playoff team, and not to be a coach who coaches developmental youngsters. Like this, he didn't apply for this job at all. This wasn't the gig. It's the gig now, and you got to roll with it, but this wasn't the gig. And I think Billups shared this sort of vision of being more competitive, of saying, like, you know what, I understand that we need developmental minutes, and I understand we need developmental time, and I understand we have youngsters who need to play and get better and sharpen their tools. But what Billups wants, and I think what he laid out fairly clearly, I've said this a bunch, I'll say it again here. I like Chauncey Billups as an interview because I think he's honest and tells you the truth. I think he says, hey, this is the thing I want to do. I want us to be competitive. Chauncey wants to win. And I don't mean to say, like, I think his vision that he sort of spoke to was very different than the one that Cronin laid out. And I don't think this is like some big thing where they're like way off, not on the same page, and there's like some rift. I just think that he spoke very honestly, is that he feels he can anticipate what's next, right? He can anticipate that there is another year coming where they lose 55 to 60 games, and he finishes a 4-year contract with, you know, a 33 win percentage and never coaching a team that played a single competitive, meaningful game after December 1st in any given season. He'll be on board. Like, Billups has been on board. Like, when they've said we're going to shut guys down, when, like, you know, 2 years ago when he freaking pulled Shaden Sharp out of a game with 8 minutes left, so they made sure they lost to the Spurs. It's not like he's not like defiant, and I don't mean to paint him as such. I just meant to say that I think the weight of losing hits people differently. The front office, it is in some ways a parachute, right? It allows you to land slowly and say, we've got a plan. We got draft picks into the future, and if they don't work out, we got draft picks coming from Milwaukee in the future, but it allows you to land. A coach, in many ways, you get Brett Browned, right? Like, if you coach a team that is designed to lose, you are very unlikely to stick around when they are built to win. There are less Mark Dagno stories than you can count, and there's many more stories of player, you know, of the coaches who coached the bad version of the teams, Mark Jackson, and it's like Mark Jackson coached them. They were pretty decent, but they weren't like the dynasty. And I think Billups was kind of feeling that. I thought it was a somber tone to his media availability. I thought it was a telling somber tone to his media availability. But it speaks to this sort of challenge for the Blazers. I don't think they want to be like, I don't think they want to lose by 60 every 80 days. I don't think that's what they want to do. But they don't want to be good. They want to play their young players and be bad again and get another really high draft pick. So it kind of puts them in the spot where they have to walk the line. Can they both put a functional product on the floor that creates a good on-court environment without creating this sort of toxic super losing environment off of it? Can they do both? I think they have to this point, but the further you walk down this path, the more challenging it becomes. Let's talk about that question and that sort of balance to close the show with some insight from some comments from some of the Blazers players. First, let's talk having fun on your couch. Picture this. You're watching the NBA playoffs. Game goes to halftime. You know you got 15, maybe 17 minutes to kind of do your thing. And you're like, what am I going to do? Well, why not dial up Monopoly Go? Get back in the game. Take as much of your friend's money as you possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. You can make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a friggin' wrecking ball, or you can charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra awards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Joe Cronin laid out a sort of, he would never use the T word, right? Like, I've never heard an executive say tanking out loud. But he used sort of developmental and timeline and patience and sort of all the indicators, investment in their young players, all of these indicators that like this team is going to be patient and bad again because, maybe Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe pop and they're not bad, right? But they're going to commit to the youngsters, right? It's pretty clear from Cronin's comments that that's the direction they want to go. And even when pressed if they were going to add, would they make a big swing to add talent? He was kind of like, no, we won't balk at adding talent. I think they probably will try to add some shooting, but they're not they don't want to add like a fringe all-star type player. They want to continue to build with the young guys they have. They want to stay on the timeline they're on, and that timeline is the one that they've established in the last two drafts with Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson. I think the challenge is for the Blazers is that this year they didn't put Scoot Henderson in the ideal on-court environment because he didn't play with enough shooters, and he has his own struggles, and so his own sort of like doesn't finish very well, can get a little turnover prone, and had some sort of like navigating traffic, and then he played on a team where there was even more traffic in the paint because of the non-shooters. Like they need to put him in a better sort of on-court environment. I would say Shaedon Sharpe needs to be in a situation specifically where he is. I think Sharpe struggled when the play calls were him as like, hey, it's your turn, but you might be the third sort of mouth to feed on the offense, but you're going to get your turn. And so he wouldn't be as aggressive because it wasn't like, hey, you get the ball and go. It wasn't as like sort of specifically nailed down for him. And I thought in the end of his season, he played 30 some games, but like at the end of the season, there was like some challenges with like getting him to be aggressive all the time. So putting them in situations where they can succeed, right? A positive on-court environment is part of the balance of this whole thing, right? I think the unquestionable part of the balance. But it's also continuing to maintain a positive off-court environment. I think for the most part this year, the Blazers did that, right? They got thrashed historically a couple times, but I think for the most part they were competitive. They had a lot of games where they would be like, we were only down 11 for the whole game. Look at us. Competitive game. Like they were never in it, but it's like they could go back and say like, hey, we didn't get rocked. Or games where they would be like down 8-12 and then the team would make a run and be down 17. Ah, shucks, we lost by 17. But the games where they got like truly run out of the gym, and they did historically run out of the gym on 2 occasions, but the games where they got historically run out of the gym were a little bit few and far between this year. Maybe not few and far between. That might be an exaggeration. They weren't the norm. They got beat often, and they got beat because they didn't have talent often, but they didn't get thrashed and embarrassed and look like they quit fairly often. It was a pretty bad trip in January and all those things. But for the most part, they're competitive. Varying levels of what competitive means. But there is a balance to how long you can create an environment where teams lose, and your team goes in knowing they're going to lose 40 games, and you create an environment that isn't somewhat negative, right? Off court. I think the on court environment, you can add skill sets. If the Blazers add like 2 guys who can shoot in the offseason, switch out like 2 like less ball dominant guys who can shoot, and have them be true floor spacers, that would be really valuable to sort of their on court product. And the off court product, the off court sort of environment is just maintaining a balance of making sure everyone's pulling the rope in the same direction. I thought Rob Williams in his exit interview, he spoke on Friday a little bit early. Blazers did a weird like split exit interview thing with a couple injured guys who weren't gonna talk on their final day. And Rob Williams mentioned kind of in passing a couple times, but he mentioned it I think 3 times during his comments that he found value in his voice because there was times this year that players on the team would what he described as go their separate ways. And I don't mean to read too much into that because that's just like sort of maybe basketball player talk. But I think it suggests that like there are things we don't see with this team and things that I think weren't reported with this team versus guys who are like closer on the beat than I am. That this was a struggle for some. And I would say it's probably, if I had to guess, a struggle for the more veteran players, right? Because this team is balancing playing youth and prioritizing, some like Scoot was one of the worst players in the NBA at the beginning of the year. And it's like, he's playing every night. It's like a weird thing to balance, right? I think there could be frustrations, or there's just frustrations with losing and your role, and DeAndre Ayton figured out his role and all the things and who plays and when. And I think and Rob Williams mentioned that sort of like there were times this year when guys wouldn't say what they would go their separate ways and wouldn't say what they were kind of going through, and if they weren't open about their frustrations and those things, but that when you come together and are open about things, you can work through them as a team, right? The basketball teams are weird. It's 5 guys, outsized, it's like stars and leaders have sort of an outsized responsibility, can have an outsized influence, and I think the Blazers had like sort of that central figure to be that influence on this particular team. I don't mean to say that there was like hidden beef and that Rob Williams told me there was hidden beef, but I'm saying there was probably more bumps along the way than we understand, and those can continue. And if you lose every night, if you lose 60 out of 80 games, those bumps can continue along. And I think that's sort of what Billups is seeing when he's like voicing his desire to be more competitive. And I think this is the big question, the big balance. The Blazers need to make trades. They need to, Malcolm Brogdon mentioned that he doesn't know what his future will be and whether he'll be with the Blazers, but he enjoyed his time in Portland. And when you use the past tense, I enjoyed my time in Portland, when talking about your future, it might suggest that, your future is that that your future is not with this team. And Anthony Simons mentioned that he's heading into his 7th NBA season and he doesn't want a repeat of last year. Those types of things where Malcolm Brogdon is like, I don't know if I'm going to be here or whatever. I feel it's uncertainty. And another veteran guy in Anthony Simons saying, I don't want to be on a losing team again. And obviously, like, Anthony Simons part of the losing. Some of his deficiencies lead to the losing, et cetera, et cetera. Like, again, this is the Billups thing. But like, that going back into the darkness, going back into a 55-loss season, it can wear on folks. And that's why I think there is some risk in running it back with a very similar roster. I think the Blazers should make major changes this year, and if they're really about the development, they should commit to it in earnest. They can trade back for vets who have less sort of on-ball dominant roles and like really turn the keys over to the youngsters while still having some adults in the room. But if they do that, they have to be mindful of creating a good on-court environment with the skill sets you add and maintaining what will be an increasingly challenging off-court environment, because it's not one year. It's the cumulative effect of losing over 160 consecutive regular season games for 2 years. And for guys who have been around longer, although who knows who'll be around, 3 consecutive years. Or if players who are there for, like in Simon's case, from the beginning of the Chauncey era, it would be 4 consecutive seasons of punting and losing intentionally at the end of the year, and that can wear on guys, and that creates that sort of negative, toxic, non-beneficial off-court environment. I'm not saying it's guaranteed to happen. I'm not saying it happened this year. I'm saying that is a real risk, and not even real risk, the real challenge, the fine line that you walk when you say, we're going to be a team that commits to development, and you don't have everyone pulling the rope in the same direction. So what you need to have when you build this roster, and I think this is sort of the soft magic of roster building, is making sure everyone who is involved when you get to the fall, or if you need to make trades after that, but everyone who's involved in the sort of the medium-term vision understands what the plan is, understands what the deal is, understands where they're headed and why they're headed there. Because I think this season, mostly positive vibes, mostly positive team, mostly and Billups talks about this. It's like the really good energy around the team, right? He said they had the vibes of a 50-win team, even though they were a 60-loss team. But maintaining that going forward, kind of feeling the weight and the cascading weight of continuing to do it is a tough balance. And that's the hard part for Cronin, is that he wants to do the right thing, which is a patient, slow development and be bad again and have another high draft pick. And that is absolutely the correct path. But walking that path, walking that line, heading back into the darkness knowingly at the beginning of the season is like, it takes a lot of buy-in. It takes a strong culture to do that and to come out on the other side and have it be like, I don't think like you can create a losing culture losing habits, but you can create losses, and losses can lead to, I don't think you can like create a habit that sticks with guys like for long periods of time, but you can create like short-term really bad situations. And there is and when you're building a team that is knowingly going to lose, it is a chance of creating some short-term really bad situations. That's the balance. What a fun offseason ahead as they try to figure this thing out, because they got a long way to go. And so do we. That's what we're going to do. We're going to continue moving forward with our sort of off-season coverage, where we will do I'm going to run through my player exit interviews, or what I call them, player capsules, end of the season capsules, where I look back at my predictions from the beginning of the season, and we look ahead to what's next for folks. We'll do a couple of those this week. We got a draft show coming up. I'm hoping to nail down an interview with a draft expert, but I haven't got it confirmed, so you just stay tuned. But we got fun stuff 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. Tell your friends about the podcast. I'll talk to you soon.